Hello and welcome to the very first video that I can actually call a tutorial, or a how-to, whatever you wish to call it. In this video I'm going to be showing you how to make the funnels and domes used on the Season 1 perspex models of Thomas, Edward, James and Percy, although Percy doesn't use the exact same dome. The things that you're going to need for this are as follows. A knife, preferably a sharp one. A very expensive, very fancy pair of calipers, or if you're like any normal person, a steel ruler. I don't have mine on me at the moment, so I'm using that. A scale drawing of the model in question is advised, but not required. Having the physical model in front of you is a much better idea, but you'll want the drawing for that anyway, so yeah. You'll need, oh, I'll put it over there, a hacksaw, and most importantly, you need a Sharpie. Now this is what will actually become the funnel and the dome, if you choose to build one. And you're also going to need some files for later. And a bit of this stuff. Milliput. Doesn't have to be silver grey, it can be literally any colour you want, it's going to be painted regardless. But you need milliput, it is brilliant. Now, first thing that you do is you take your Sharpie and you take your measuring implement of choice and you measure how long the funnel and the dome need to be. Now the dome, you start from the tapered end of the Sharpie, of the body of the Sharpie, and you go down from that. For the funnel, wherever the dome ends, again, you go down from that, because you want the narrowest section of the tapered body of the Sharpie. After that, you want to cut this ring from the opposite end of the Sharpie, which needs to be about this sort of size, maybe a little bit less, about there, which will become the top ring of the funnel, as you can see here. After doing that, you will also want to cut off the lid of the Sharpie to the length of the dome that you need, or just under it actually. I think the one for Thomas ends about there to make room for the milliput, which becomes the domed end. And the reason that you take the cap of the Sharpie and the end of the body of the Sharpie to make the dome is because it fits over the edge and it's a very snug fit, which you can glue on later. Oh, and you'll also need glue, very important. So, now that you know which parts you're cutting off the Sharpie, the next step is to cut up the Sharpie. So having separated the Sharpie into the components that we require, these two are rubbish. What we need is this ring, which you will have to put a small split in. The end of the cap of the Sharpie, this section here, and the end of the body of the Sharpie. So you take the end of the cap and the end of the body and you press them together, if I can remember how, just about like so, which gives you a base to put the milliput on. The funnel, notice it is slightly tapered, so you take the larger end, and this is why the ring is slightly split, as you press it over the top of the Sharpie and align it it, like so. And you'll fill this in later with Milliput. If the camera would focus, it would be amazing. So now you have these two blanks. Go around them with a file, glue them together. Another very important step that I often see people miss when they make videos like this is you need to sand the components very lightly before you glue them together, especially in the case of Sharpies, because the ink on them will bleed through the paint. Ask me how I know this. Next step is you take the Milliput, which is a 2-part epoxy clay, and you break off a fairly sizable piece of it, a piece of each of the components, and you mix them together, which will begin the reaction. Once you've done this, you have about 10-15 minutes of working time before it begins to harden off and stop sticking to everything, but that's more than enough time to do what you want to do with it. I'll also advise you to have your knife on hand, as you will be needing it to cut the Milliput to size once you have applied it to certain pieces, and you will also need a container of water. I'm not bothered what you keep it in. I use a spray paint lid, as you will see in a moment, but anything with plain tap water in it, which will allow you to smooth the Milliput once you have applied it. Once it is sufficiently mixed, it will turn an even colour throughout, like so. And as I said previously, then get your container of water. Now you can see me checking that yes, water is indeed wet. Keep that to one side for later. Do not use any water until you need to. It will stop the Milliput from sticking, but it does smooth it out very well. Now take a chunk of Milliput, press it over the end of the dome, and knead it in around the edges. And just keep working it in to all the crevices. Take off more if you need, as you can see me doing here, until you have the desired shape of the Season 1 dome. It can take a little while. It can take an awful lot of Milliput, which is why you see me using this much here. It is always better to mix up more than you need. Otherwise, you'll be scrambling to get another batch mixed together while the stuff that you've already got is already halfway through curing, which is very, very inadvisable. I've been there several times. Don't do it. It's stupid. Again, just keep working it into the top of the dome until eventually you end up with the shape that you want. When you're happy with it, get a bit of water, smooth out all the fingerprints and marks in it, and you'll see that it becomes a very even and uniform shape. It's really not rocket science, just like moulding clay or Play-Doh. It's about the consistency of blue tack. The next step after this is you need to cut off a small piece of Milliput. Very, very small piece, even smaller than that, because you are going to use it to fill in the gap in the back of the funnel ring. And this is why I advise you to keep the knife handy, because as you can see, that piece is way too big. So what you do
is you take your knife, you press it against the top edge and the bottom edge of the funnel ring, and you cut off the excess milliput very cleanly. And remove it like so. Again to the bottom edge. Simple as that. And that is done. Just smooth it out with the edge of the knife blade if you have to. Make sure it's pressed firmly in place. And that's the funnel. Completely finished. Aside from installing it, of course. Here you can just see me screwing around with it because that's what I do best. You should end up with something looking roughly like that, which you can sand later. After this, take the body shell of the model for which you are making the funnel and the dome. Oh, and also get your glue tube at the ready. Take your body shell, take the tube of glue. You are now going to apply them to the model. Do not use more glue than you need, because believe me, super glue is very, very difficult to sand off. Take the funnel, put a bit of glue on it, press it on in the right spot, and hope that it stays there, and hold it there while the glue tacks off, and make sure that it's on straight. Keep your hand on it to make sure that it stays straight. And if you're wondering how I know where to place them, I have the picture of this model sitting just out of shot. And it's about this point that the dome fell off, because I picked it up and moved it too suddenly and the glue hadn't gone off yet, as you can see here. Do as I say, not as I do. So if you apply the dome correctly, with enough glue, and let it set, and try not to glue it to your fingers, and hope that it goes on straight, you'll eventually be able to move on to the next step. And that next step is taking the milliput that you have mixed and rolling it out into a very, very thin sausage, for want of a better term. And this is going to become the join between the funnel and the boiler. So you take it and you press it in and wrap it around the base of the funnel, keeping it flush to both the funnel and the boiler at the same time, and make sure that it is very well stuck. I will say it is advisable to do this once the glue has set, as just after recording this, the dome did actually pop off. But basically just keep kneading the milliput into the base of the funnel until you create a decent sloping edge, or sloping transition rather. And once you're happy that it's fairly well stuck on there, go for the water. And it is very, very important that you get this as close to the shape that you want as you possibly can while the milliput is wet, or malleable rather. Because believe me, you cannot sand or file milliput once it has dried, no matter what the packaging says. It gums up the sandpaper and it will clog a file. So get it as smooth as you possibly can, whilst you can, because after it's set, you're going to have a really tough time trying to get it into any shape whatsoever. And especially where it is on the funnel, I know from experience, having done both Thomas and Edward, that it is very, very difficult to actually get in, especially at the sides of the funnel. The front and the back aren't too bad, but the sides of it are a nightmare. But this is the sort of finish that you want to end up with while it's still malleable. And since I haven't actually sanded it yet whilst I'm recording this voiceover, I can tell you, if you do it right, you won't have to sand it off at all. Or if you do, it'll only be a very light go over so that the paint will stick. Now do the same with the dome. Now on Edward, you want a much wider sloping transition for the dome. I don't know why they did that for Edward and not for all the rest of them. Heck, even James doesn't have it. So just roll at a slightly thicker amount of milliput. And again, one reason that I advise doing this after the glue and the milliput has set is so that you can actually keep your finger on top of the dome to stop it from moving around. As you can see, past me was really bothered about framing here. But basically do exactly the same as you did with the funnel. Just press it in to create the transition. Make sure that it's very well stuck. And if you are doing this after applying the dome the same way I've done here, make sure that you keep even pressure on either side of the dome so you don't pop it off the boiler. And again, once you're happy with it, just smooth it out with water. Again, as I've said, the better the finish you can get here and now, the easier it'll be for yourself in the future, as you won't have to do quite as much work to it. Just don't do quite as much as I do here, because I actually ended up with not enough transition on the sides, because I made the milliput too thin. Basically, if it looks respectable and you're thinking on giving it another pass with water, don't, because you will bugger it up. Again, I've been there, and you can see at this point that the milliput is getting far too thin around the edges. And again, if you are doing this with wet glue shortly after applying the dome to the boiler, be very, very careful, because, as I say, just after I finished recording this, I did snap the dome clean off the boiler, paint and all. And try and get as much of the water off the boiler as you can before that sets, because the small amount of milliput in it will make it stick. But once you've done that, wait for the milliput and glue to dry, sand and paint. And that is how you make the dome and funnel for the Season 1 props. Thanks for watching.